The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Lincoln High School's music room, casting long shadows across the worn piano keys. 17-year-old Maya sat in her usual spot, the back corner where she could watch without being watched. Her notebook lay open, but instead of taking notes about chord progressions, she was sketching the intricate patterns she saw in the music floating around her head. Maya had learned long ago that being invisible was safer than standing out. Her faded jeans and secondhand sneakers told a story she preferred not to share. While her classmates arrived with expensive instrument cases and talked about their weekend private lessons, Maya clutched her worn backpack a little tighter and kept her eyes down. Mrs. Williams, their music teacher, stood at the front of the room with her usual stern expression. She was the kind of teacher who believed that pressure created diamonds, though Maya often wondered if it just crushed most people instead. The older woman's sharp eyes scanned the room as she spoke about the upcoming spring recital. "This year's recital will be different," Mrs. Williams announced, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. "Each of you will perform a challenging classical piece, no exceptions, no easy songs. This is your chance to prove you belong in advanced music theory." Maya's stomach dropped. She watched as her classmates exchanged excited glances and whispered about which pieces they might choose. Jessica, who sat in the front row with her perfectly styled hair and designer clothes, was already discussing her options with her neighbor. Her family's wealth meant she had access to the best teachers and could tackle any piece with confidence. The truth was, Maya loved music more than anything in the world. Late at night, when her little brother was asleep and her mother was working, her second job at the all-night diner, Maya would slip on her headphones and lose herself in the melodies that lived in her heart. She had an old keyboard at home, a gift from her grandmother years ago, but she'd never played in front of anyone except the walls of her tiny bedroom. Mrs. Williams continued her announcement, unaware of the panic building in Maya's chest. "I'll be assigning pieces based on your current skill level and dedication to this class. Some of you will get pieces that push you, others will get pieces that might seem impossible." Maya tried to make herself even smaller in her chair. She had always been quiet in class, not because she didn't understand the material, but because she understood it too well. When Mrs. Williams explained complex musical concepts, Maya already knew them. When they discussed the emotional depth of classical composers, Maya felt like she was hearing descriptions of old friends, but understanding music and being able to prove it were two different things. Maya's family couldn't afford private lessons. They couldn't afford a real piano. They could barely afford the rent on their small apartment across town. Maya had learned to keep her musical knowledge to herself, answering questions only when directly asked and never volunteering information that might draw attention. The classroom grew quiet as Mrs. Williams began walking around the room, stopping at each student's desk to assign their recital pieces. Maya watched the pattern. The students who participated more got moderately challenging pieces, while those who seemed less engaged received easier assignments. She felt a small spark of hope. Maybe her strategy of staying invisible would work in her favor this time. But Mrs. Williams had noticed Maya's silence throughout the semester, and it bothered her. The teacher believed that quiet students were either lazy or lacking in musical understanding. She had decided that Maya needed a wake-up call. When Mrs. Williams finally reached Maya's desk, she paused for a long moment. The entire class seemed to hold its breath. Maya looked up to meet her teacher's eyes, and she saw something there that made her heart race, not kindness, but a kind of cold determination. "Miss Rodriguez," Mrs. Williams said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent room, "since you seem so disinterested in participating in class discussions, I'm giving you a piece that will require your full attention." Maya nodded, waiting for the assignment. She expected something moderately difficult, maybe a simple batch invention or a chopin waltz. Something she could manage with enough practice on her old keyboard. Mrs. Williams smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "You'll be performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Maya heard Jessica gasp audibly. Several students turned to stare at her with a mixture of pity and shock. Even the most advanced students in The class had never attempted anything that difficult. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago not to let people see when they had hurt her. She simply nodded and wrote the piece name in her notebook. Her hand steadied despite the storm raging inside her chest. The ballade was legendary among piano students. It was the kind of piece that professional concert pianists spent months preparing. It required not just technical skill, but deep musical maturity. Most students didn't even attempt it until college, if ever. Mrs. Williams had essentially set Maya up for public failure, as the class period ended and students began packing up their things. Maya could hear their whispered conversations. Some felt sorry for her. Others were curious to see if she would even attempt the piece or just withdraw from the recital entirely. A few seemed almost excited at the prospect of witnessing what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. Maya's friend Carlos, one of the few students who ever talked to her, approached her desk as she gathered her things. "That's insane," he whispered. "Even my private teacher says that piece is crazy hard." "Are you going to ask for something different?" Maya shook her head. She had learned from experience that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. "I'll figure it out," she said quietly, but as she walked through the hallways toward her next class, Maya's mind was already racing. She had 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to either prove herself or face humiliation in front of the entire school community. The recital was always well attended, with parents, teachers, and students from other schools coming to watch. That evening, Maya sat in her small bedroom, staring at her old keyboard. It wasn't even a full 88 keys, and some of the keys stuck when she pressed them. But it was all she had. She opened her laptop and searched for the sheet music, finding a free version on a classical music website. As she looked at the first page, her heart pounded. The piece was even more complex than she had imagined. The technical demands were enormous, but beyond that, it required a level of musical understanding that most people spent years developing. Mrs. Williams had essentially given her an impossible task, but Maya had a secret that Mrs. Williams didn't know. A secret that she had kept hidden for 3 years, locked away with her grief and her dreams. As she placed her hands on the keyboard and began to play the opening notes from memory, she felt something stirring inside her that had been sleeping. For far too long, the music that filled her tiny bedroom that night was just the beginning. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she closed her laptop after spending 2 hours studying performance videos of the ballade. The clock on her nightstand read 11:47 p.m., but sleep felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the complex musical passages dancing behind her eyelids, taunting her with their difficulty. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Hey, talked to my piano teacher today. She says that piece takes most students 6 months to learn properly. You sure you don't want to ask Mrs. Williams for something else?" Maya stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Sure, thanks though." She set the phone aside and looked around her small bedroom. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of her grandmother, taken at a piano recital many years ago. Her grandmother's hands were positioned elegantly on the keys, her face serene with concentration. Maya had inherited those same long, graceful fingers, though she'd never thought of them as special until now. The next morning at school, Maya could feel eyes on her everywhere she went. Word about her assignment had spread quickly through the music department and beyond. Students she'd never spoken to before were whispering as she passed in the hallways. Some looked at her with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with barely concealed excitement at the drama they expected to unfold. During lunch, Maya sat alone at her usual table in the corner of the cafeteria. She had printed out the sheet music and was studying it while eating her sandwich. The notes looked like tiny black insects crawling across the pages, each one representing a challenge she wasn't sure she could overcome. "Mind if I sit?" Maya looked up to see Diana, a girl from her English class. They'd never really talked before, but Diana had always seemed kind in the way she treated everyone equally, regardless of their social status. "Sure," Maya said, quickly closing the sheet music. Diana sat down and unwrapped her lunch. I heard about your piano assignment. That's really intense. Maya nodded, not sure what to say. She wasn't used to people showing interest in her life. Are you nervous? Diana asked gently. Terrified, Maya admitted before she could stop herself. The honesty surprised her. She rarely let her guard down with anyone. Diana smiled. I get that. I had to give a speech in front of the whole school last year for student council. I threw up twice beforehand. She paused. But you know what? Sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we're actually ready for. Maya looked at her. Curiously, what do you mean? I mean, Mrs. Williams might be tough, but she's not stupid. She's been teaching for like 20 years. Maybe she sees something in you that you don't see in yourself? Maya wanted to believe that, but she knew the truth. Mrs. Williams had assigned her the impossible piece as punishment for being quiet, not because she believed Maya could handle it. Still, Diana's words planted a small seed of possibility in her mind. That evening, Maya's mother came home from her first job at the grocery store, exhausted as usual. She worked there during the day and at the diner at night, leaving Maya to take care of her 10-year-old brother Lise most of the time. How was school, Mia? Her mother asked, collapsing into their worn couch. Maya hesitated. She'd never told her mother about her music class struggles. Her mom had enough worries without adding Maya's problems to the list. Fine, Maya said. Just have a big project coming up. Her mother nodded, already half asleep. Maya watched her for a moment, noticing the new lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged with fatigue. This was why Maya had learned to be invisible, to not ask for things they couldn't afford, to solve her own problems. Louise burst through the front door, his backpack trailing behind him. Maya, can you help me with my math homework? It's really hard, Maya smiled at her little brother. He was the opposite of her, loud, confident, never afraid to ask for help. Sure, let me see what you've got. As they worked on his multiplication problems at the kitchen table, Maya's mind kept drifting to the piano piece waiting for her. She had been practicing every night, but quietly, always with headphones, so she wouldn't wake anyone or disturb the neighbors. The old keyboard's keys felt different from a real piano, and she worried that the muscle memory she was building might not translate properly. Maya, you're not paying attention, Lise complained. You said 8 times 7 was 53. Sorry, Maya said, refocusing on his homework. It's 56. After Lise went to bed, Maya finally had time to practice. She put on her headphones and opened the sheet music to the section she'd been working on. The piece was divided into several distinct sections, each with its own character and challenges. The opening was deceptively simple, but Maya knew it. Had to be perfect because it set the tone for everything that followed. As she played, she tried to imagine how it would sound on a real piano. Her keyboard couldn't reproduce the full dynamic range of the piece. She couldn't make the thunderous fortissimo passages that were supposed to shake the concert hall, nor could she achieve the whisper-soft pianissimo moments that should barely disturb the air, but something strange was happening as she practiced. The music was starting to feel familiar, not just intellectually but emotionally. The melodies were finding a home in her heart, and her fingers were beginning to remember the patterns even when she wasn't consciously thinking about them. Around midnight, Maya took a break and walked to her bedroom window. The apartment building across the street was mostly dark, but she could see the glow of televisions and phones in a few windows. She wondered if anyone else was awake, struggling with their own impossible challenges. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from some of her classmates. Did you guys see the video of Lang Lang playing the ballade? It's insane. Yeah, that's the piece Maya has to play. Rip. Maybe she just not show up to the recital. Or play something else and hope Mrs. Williams doesn't notice. Maya read the messages with a sinking heart. Even her classmates had written her off. She was about to put the phone away when another message appeared. I think you guys are underestimating her. Maya's always been really smart. Maybe she can pull it off. It was Diana. Maya stared at the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Someone believed in her, even just a little bit? It was More than she'd had yesterday. She went back to the keyboard and played through the opening section again. This time, she didn't focus on the technical challenges or the impossible timeline. Instead, she let herself feel the music, let it flow through her fingers the way water flows through a stream. For the first time since Mrs. Williams had assigned the piece, Maya began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Not because it was easy, but because the music was calling to something deep inside her, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment to wake up. The clock showed 12:43 a.m., but Maya kept playing. She had work to do. Maya woke up at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of her mother's alarm. Through the thin walls of their apartment, she could hear her mom getting ready for another early shift at the grocery store. Maya lay in bed for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of their morning routine. Her mother would leave by 5:15, work until 2 o'clock, then rush home to grab a quick meal before heading to the diner for her evening shift. But today felt different. Today, Maya had woken up with music in her head. Not just any music, the ballade. The melody had been playing in her dreams, and now it felt like it was part of her heartbeat. She waited until she heard the front door close behind her mother, then quietly got up and went to her keyboard. Louise was still sleeping, and she had about 2 hours before she needed to wake him up for school. She put on her headphones and began to play. Something had changed overnight. The notes that had felt clumsy and foreign just days ago now flowed naturally from her fingers. It was as if her hands remembered something her mind had forgotten. As she played, memories began to surface, memories she had buried deep 3 years ago. She was 8 years old, sitting on a piano bench beside her grandmother, Abuela Elena. The old woman's hands were guiding hers across the keys of an ancient upright piano that had somehow made its way from Cuba to their small apartment. "Music is not just about playing the right notes, Mia," her grandmother had said in her gentle, accented voice. "Music is about telling stories with your heart. The notes are just the words, but you must give them life." Maya remembered those Saturday afternoons when her grandmother would teach her. Not just simple songs, but complex pieces that most children her age couldn't even read. Chopin, Bach, Debussy, composers whose names felt like old friends in her grandmother's mouth. "You have the gift, Maya," Abuela Elena had told her many times. "Your fingers know what to do before your mind tells them." This is very rare, but Maya had been too young to understand how rare. She thought everyone could hear music the way she did, could feel the emotions flowing through the melodies, could play by ear after hearing a piece just once or twice. When her grandmother died suddenly of a heart attack 3 years ago, Maya had been devastated. The old upright piano had been sold to pay for funeral expenses, and with it went the last connection to the musical world her grandmother had shown her. Maya had convinced herself that the music died with Abuela Elena, that her gift was just a child's imagination. Now, sitting at her cheap keyboard in the pre-dawn darkness, Maya realized how wrong she had been. The music had never left her. It had been waiting, growing stronger in the silence, ready to emerge when she needed it most. She played through the ballade's opening section again, but this time she could hear her grandmother's voice guiding her. Feel the sadness in the minor key, but also the hope trying to break through. Chopin wrote this after his homeland was invaded. He was in exile, remembering the beauty of what he had lost. Maya's fingers found the subtle changes in dynamics. That brought the piece to life. She understood now why Mrs. Williams had chosen this piece. It wasn't just technically difficult, it was emotionally complex, requiring a maturity that most teenagers didn't possess, but Maya had lived through loss. She understood longing and hope and the ache of missing someone who would never come back. The music spoke to her in a language she had learned from her grandmother, a language of feeling rather than thinking. As she played, she began to remember other pieces her grandmother had taught her. Difficult pieces that should have been impossible for a child, but had somehow made perfect sense to her young fingers. She remembered the pride in her grandmother's eyes when Maya mastered a particularly challenging passage, the way the old woman would close her eyes and sway slightly when Maya played something beautiful. "Why don't you play for others?" her grandmother had asked once. "Your gift should be shared." I don't know, Maya had replied, even as a child uncomfortable with attention. I like playing just for you. Her grandmother had smiled sadly. One day, Mia, you will need to play for the world. Music this beautiful is meant to be heard. Maya stopped playing and pulled off her headphones. Her hands were shaking slightly, but not from nerves, from excitement. For the first time in 3 years, she felt connected to something larger than herself. She looked at the clock, 6:45 a.m. Lise would be waking up soon, and she needed to get him ready for school. But first, she had something important to do. Maya walked to her closet and pulled out a small box she kept hidden behind her winter clothes. Inside was a collection of sheet music, yellowed with age. Her grandmother's music, pieces they had played. Together during those magical Saturday afternoons, she leafed through the pages, recognizing songs she had forgotten. She knew Bach's Goldberg Variations, Debussy's Clair de Lune, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. These were pieces that even advanced students struggled with, pieces her grandmother had taught her when she was just a child. At the bottom of the box was a folded piece of paper. Maya opened it carefully and found a letter in her grandmother's handwriting, dated just a month before she died. My dearest Maya, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found your way back to the music. I always knew you would. The gift you have is not just talent, it is a calling. You were born to make music that moves people's hearts. I have watched you grow and learn, and I know that one day you will play for audiences who will weep at the beauty you create. Do not hide this gift. The world needs your music, even if you don't understand that yet. Play with courage, Mia. Play with all the love in your heart. I will always be listening. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she read the letter. She had been so focused on staying invisible, on not drawing attention to herself, that she had forgotten who she really was. She wasn't just Maya Rodriguez, the quiet girl from the poor family. She was Maya Rodriguez, the granddaughter of Elena Vasquez, who had once played piano in the finest concert halls of Havana. Maya? Luce's sleepy voice came from the next room. Are you awake? Coming, she called back, carefully folding the letter and putting it back in the box. As she helped Luis get ready for school, Maya felt different. The fear was still there. She would be performing in front of hundreds of people in just 2 weeks. But underneath the fear was something stronger, purpose. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Play with courage. Mia, that morning. At school, Maya walked through the hallways with her head held slightly higher. When she passed Mrs. Williams in the corridor, she made eye contact for the first time in months. Good morning, Maya, her teacher said, looking surprised. Good morning. Mrs. Williams, Maya replied. I wanted to thank you for giving me the ballade. It's a beautiful piece. Mrs. Williams blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Are you are you prepared for it? Maya smiled, thinking of her grandmother's hands guiding hers, of the music. That had been waiting patiently in her heart for 3 years. I'm getting there, she said. And for the first time since the assignment was given, Maya truly believed she was. The morning of the recital arrived with an unusual spring storm. Maya woke to the sound of rain hammering against her bedroom window and thunder rumbling in the distance. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to nature's percussion section, and felt strangely calm. The storm outside seemed to match the energy building inside her. Her phone showed 17 missed text messages. Word had spread beyond the school about the quiet girl who was attempting the impossible piano piece. Some messages were from classmates wishing her luck. Others were from people she barely knew who had heard about the challenge. Diana had sent 3 messages of encouragement, and even Carlos had written a long text about how proud he was of her courage. But the message that made her smile was from an unknown number. Heard about your recital today. Break a leg, kid. Music lives in the heart, not in the fingers. A friend of your grandmother's. Maya stared at the message, wondering who could have sent it. Her grandmother had many friends in the local music community, though Maya had lost touch with most of them after the funeral. Someone was still watching out for her. She got dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that had belonged to her mother. It was nothing fancy, but it was clean and dignified. As she brushed her hair, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. The girl looking back at her didn't look scared anymore. She looked determined. The school auditorium was already buzzing with activity when Maya arrived 2 hours before the recital. Parents were setting up folding chairs and the stage crew was adjusting the lighting. In the center of the stage sat the grand piano, a beautiful black Steinway that the school had borrowed from the local music conservatory for the event. Maya stood in the wings, staring at the instrument. It was so different from her little keyboard at home. The keys would feel different, the sound would be richer, the pedals would respond differently. For a moment, her old fears crept back in. What if she had practiced wrong? What if her technique didn't translate to a real piano? "You can go practice on it if you want," said a voice behind her. Maya turned to see Mr. Peterson, the school's drama teacher, who was helping coordinate the recital. He was a kind man with gray hair and gentle eyes. "Really?" Maya asked. "Of course. You're the only one brave enough to attempt something that difficult. You deserve some time to get comfortable with the instrument." Maya walked onto the empty stage, her footsteps echoing in the large space. The auditorium looked enormous from up here. In a few hours it would be filled with people, all watching her. The thought should have been terrifying, but instead she felt a strange sense of homecoming. She sat at the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height. The keys were smooth and responsive under her fingers, nothing like the sticky keys on her keyboard. She played a few scales, marveling at the rich, full sound that filled the space. This was what music was supposed to sound like. Other students began arriving for their own practice sessions. Maya watched from the wings as they ran through their pieces. Jessica performed a Mozart sonata with technical precision but little emotion. A boy named Alex played a Bach invention that was clean but mechanical. They were all good, competent performances, but Maya could feel that something was missing. The music was correct, but it wasn't alive. Mrs. Williams appeared beside her, holding a clipboard and looking stressed about the day's logistics. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Nervous," Maya admitted, "but ready." Her teacher studied her for a moment. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I assigned you that piece for the wrong reasons. I thought you weren't trying, that you didn't care about music. I was wrong." Maya looked at her in surprise. "What changed your mind?" "I've been watching. You practice in the music room during lunch. I've seen how you look at the sheet music, how you move your fingers when you think no one is watching. You understand music in a way that can't be taught." Mrs. Williams paused. I should have recognized it sooner. Before Maya could respond, her teacher continued. "There's something else. I called the conservatory to ask about the piano, and I mentioned your piece. The director there knew your grandmother. She said Elena used to talk about her granddaughter all the time, said you were the most gifted young musician she'd ever encountered." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She really said that? She did? And she asked if she could come tonight to hear you play. She'd be in the front row. The auditorium began filling with people as evening approached. Maya watched from backstage as families found their seats, programs rustling in their hands. She spotted her mother in the third row, having left work early for the first time Maya could remember. Luis sat beside her, wearing his best shirt and looking around with wide eyes. The recital began with the younger students performing simpler pieces. Maya listened from the wings, noting how the acoustic of the full auditorium changed the sound. The piano seemed to sing differently with an audience present, as if it were feeding off the energy of the listeners. As her turn approached, Maya felt a strange calm descend over her. She thought about her grandmother's letter, about the music that had been waiting inside her for 3 years, about all the nights she had practiced in secret. This wasn't just about proving Mrs. Williams wrong anymore. This was about honoring her grandmother's memory and finally sharing the gift she had been hiding. "Maya Rodriguez, performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor," the announcer called. The auditorium fell silent. Maya could hear whispers as she walked onto the stage. She knew what they were thinking. This was the quiet girl who had been set up to fail, the student who had been given an impossible task. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, some sympathetic, some curious, some skeptical. She sat at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The stage lights were warm on her face, and she could just make out the silhouette of the audience in the darkness beyond. For a moment, she felt completely alone. Then she placed her hands on the keys and everything changed. The first notes of the ballade emerged into the silence, soft and contemplative. Maya felt her grandmother's presence beside her, guiding her, hands as she had so many years ago. The music flowed through her fingers as naturally as breathing, each phrase building on the last dot. The audience disappeared. The stage lights faded. There was only Maya and the music and the story she was telling through sound. The piece moved through its various sections, the gentle opening, the more agitated middle passages, the moments of technical brilliance that showcased her skill, and finally the powerful, emotional climax that brought everything together. As she played, Maya could feel the audience's energy shift. The whispers stopped. The rustling of programs ceased. Even the youngest children in the audience seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special. The music poured out of her. 3 years of hidden practice and suppressed talent finally finding expression. Every note was perfect. But more than that, every note was alive with feeling. This wasn't just a performance. It was a conversation between Maya and everyone who had ever doubted her, including herself. When she reached the final section, Maya felt tears on her cheeks. She was saying goodbye to the scared, invisible girl she had been and hello to the musician she was meant to become. The last notes rang out into the silence, sustaining in the warm air of the auditorium. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause began. The silence that followed Maya's final note seemed to stretch forever. She sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys, hardly believing what had just happened. The music had flowed through her so naturally that she almost felt like she had been watching someone else play. Then the applause erupted. It started with one person standing up in the front row, the conservatory director who had known her grandmother. Then another person rose, and another, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. The sound was thunderous, echoing off the walls and ceiling. Maya had never heard anything like it. She stood slowly, her legs feeling unsteady, and took a bow. The applause continued, growing even louder. In the third row, she could see her mother crying, her hands pressed to her mouth in amazement. Luis was jumping up and down, clapping wildly and shouting, "That's my sister!" Even though his voice was lost in the roar of the crowd. As Maya walked off stage, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Behind the curtain, she found Mrs. Williams waiting for her, tears streaming down her face. "Maya," her teacher said, her voice breaking. "I am so sorry. I had no idea. That was extraordinary." Before Maya could respond, other students began surrounding her. Jessica, who had always ignored her before, was staring at her with wide eyes. "How did you learn to play like that?" "That was incredible." Carlos pushed through the crowd and grabbed her in a huge hug. "I knew you were hiding something." "That was amazing, Maya. You sounded like a professional." Even students from other schools who were performing that night came over to congratulate her. Maya felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to hide or blend in. She was exactly where she belonged. The conservatory director appeared backstage, an elegant older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "You must be Elena's granddaughter," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Patricia Reeves. Your grandmother talked about you constantly. She would be so proud." "You knew my grandmother?" Maya asked, still feeling dazed. "I knew her well. We performed together many times when we were younger. She always said you had inherited not just her talent, but her musical soul." Dr. Reeves paused, studying Maya carefully. "I'd like to talk with you and your mother about some opportunities. Would that be possible?" Maya nodded, not sure what opportunities she meant, but sensing that this conversation would be important. The rest of the recital continued, but Maya barely heard the other performances. Students, parents, and teachers kept coming up to her, introducing themselves and asking about her musical background. Word was spreading quickly through the local music community about the unknown student who had just delivered a performance that many professional pianists would envy. When the recital ended, Maya's mother found her backstage, still crying. "Mia," she said, pulling Maya into a tight embrace. "I had no idea you could play like that. When did you learn? How did you learn?" "Abuela taught me," Maya said simply, "before she died. I've been practicing ever since, just quietly." Her mother held her at arm's length, looking into her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this a secret?" Maya looked down at her hands. "I didn't want you to worry about money for lessons or a real piano. I know we can't afford those things, and after Abuela died, I thought maybe the music died with her." "Oh, sweetheart," her mother said, fresh tears starting. "Music like that doesn't die, it lives forever." Dr. Reeves approached them, introducing herself to Maya's mother and explaining her connection to Elena. "I'd like to discuss some scholarship opportunities," she said. "There are several programs for exceptionally gifted students that would cover not just lessons, but potentially college tuition as well." Maya's mother looked stunned. "Scholarships? Are you serious?" "Very serious. What I heard tonight was rare. Maybe once in a generation rare. Maya has a gift that needs to be nurtured." Over the next hour, Dr. Reeves explained various programs available through the conservatory and partner universities. Full scholarships for private lessons, summer intensives with world-renowned teachers, and eventually full college scholarships to some of the best music schools in the country. "But I have to ask," Dr. Reeves said, turning to Maya, "is this what you want? Sometimes when people discover a talent like yours, they assume it automatically becomes your career path. But the choice has to be yours." Maya thought about the question. Seriously. 3 hours ago, she had been the invisible girl in the back of the music room. Now she was being offered opportunities she had never dared to dream about. "I want to keep learning," she said finally. "I want to understand music even better than I do now, and I think I want to share it with people. Tonight, when I was playing, I felt like I was telling a story that everyone could understand, even without words." Dr. Reeves smiled. "That's exactly what your grandmother used to say about music. She believed it was a universal language." As they talked, other students continued to approach Maya. Some wanted to know if she would teach them. Others just wanted to understand how she had kept such an incredible talent hidden. Dinah found her way through the crowd and gave her a huge hug. "I told everyone you were being underestimated," Diana said, grinning. "But even I had no idea it was this much." Maya laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I didn't know either, really. I just played the way my grandmother taught me." The school custodian began turning off lights, signaling that it was time for everyone to leave. As the crowd dispersed, Maya found herself alone with Mrs. Williams for a moment. "I owe you more than an apology," her teacher said. "I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. You tried to tell me who you were through your quietness, and I misunderstood completely." "It's okay," Maya said, and she meant it. "If you hadn't given me this piece, I might never have found my way back to the music. In a weird way, you gave me exactly what I needed." Mrs. Williams smiled through her tears. "Your grandmother would have loved seeing this. She always believed music had the power to transform lives." "It does," Maya said quietly. "It just did." As Maya walked out of the school with her family, she felt like she was stepping into a completely different life. Tomorrow, there would be phone calls about scholarships and lessons. There would be new challenges and opportunities she couldn't even imagine yet. But tonight, she was just Maya Rodriguez, the girl who had found her voice through music, and learned that sometimes the scariest challenges are actually disguised gifts. The rain had stopped, and the stars were beginning to appear through the breaking clouds. Lise grabbed her hand as they walked to the car. "Maya, will you teach me to play piano?" She squeezed his hand and smiled. "I'd love to." Behind them, the school auditorium stood empty, but if you listened carefully, you might still hear the echo of music that had changed everything. Music that proved that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful songs.